How's it going guys, Chris here, and today I'm going to be giving you a complete guide to all the machine types you'll be able to find in Horizon Forbidden West. There's 43 different machines in total, so quite a lot to see in the game, all with their own unique characteristics and behaviour patterns. So the first machine you'll find in Horizon Forbidden West's machine index is the Grazer, a pretty passive deer-like machine that usually hangs around in a herd. Its primary purpose is to grind away at the ground and cut the grass, which then gets converted to blaze, sent to one of the 4 canisters found on its back. Although Grazers generally prefer not to fight most of the time, being fairly nervous, docile machines that typically run away when threatened, they will attack you if you get too close by, using the rotor blades found on their antlers to hit you, often swinging their heads around after charging, along with strong kicks from their legs to knock you back. Because the Grazers are often busy with their heads in the dirt, completely oblivious to their surroundings, they rely on each other, along with other nearby recon machines, to sound the alarm, alerting the herd of potential danger. One of the machines often seen wandering around, searching for threats in the wild, is the Burrower. These guys monitor the environment, scanning the plant life to check on its condition, while often guarding other machines at the same time too, kind of acting like a bit of an alarm system, giving them the role of a sentry. They're pretty quick, agile machines with long bodies and short limbs, typically found in groups, and as the name suggests, they've also got the ability to burrow underground, popping up from new unexpected positions. Although generally a recon unit there to sound the alarm, burrowers won't hesitate to attack you on sight, generally swinging their tails and using melee most of the time, but also able to use ranged attacks too, launching rocks along with plasma shots from their large eye. Many sub-variants of the burrower can be seen all over the Forbidden West in different regions, ranging from trackers to elementals, even having the ability to swim and attack underwater by lunging forwards. Scroungers in the Forbidden West are very much like scrappers from the first game, hyena-like scavengers that tear off parts from dead machines for recycling. They're fairly small, lightweight and nimble by design, with 3-pronged mandibles containing saw blades, used to grind down metal and parts. Of course, those mandibles aren't just good for grinding down metal, as they do a pretty good job in offensive situations too, with those mouth saws being dangerous to humans, such as yourself. Scroungers will often try and bite you with those saw blade mandibles, using them as their primary weapon, but also use shock attacks against you too, some of which can be fired over distance, creating electrical explosions on impact. Like many other machine types in the game, Scroungers also prefer to chill out with each other, grouped up and found scavenging off other downed machines, sometimes even showing up to salvage unlooted machine carcasses in the area that have not long been taken down. Hopping along next is the kangaroo machine known as the Leaplasher, which instead of carrying a joey in its pouch, carries cargo, which in this case is acid and blaze canisters, hence why it can often be found moving around in convoys, transporting them around. Leaplashers aren't particularly big, being slightly taller than the average human, relying on its powerful legs to support its small body and cargo, housed within a pod in its chest. Canisters can be picked up using a magnetic claw, though the same claw can also be used during fights, launching carried cargo at attackers, or deploying the claw to deal damage over range, sometimes grabbing you to prevent an escape. Obviously, being a bit like a kangaroo and having those powerful legs, the Leaplasher will often chase and kick you, using agility to its advantage. Also capable of electrifying itself to deal shock damage, which can be delivered through jumping strikes over range. Leaplashers can also act as response units to aid other machines and call for reinforcement, carrying different pods to assist them in their fight, like ones that repair, deal damage using a cloud, or even scramble your focus, giving them plenty of different ways to attack and disrupt. So just like the Scrounger, the Scrapper is another 4-legged scavenger with an appetite for metal, basically having the very same job, grinding down machine carcasses for recycling. Not only does it do a similar thing, but it also looks really similar to the Scrounger in appearance too, though instead of having mandibles on its face to chew up those metal parts, it's instead got a mouth comprised of circular grinders. These guys were fairly popular machines in the first game, but not quite as widespread in the Forbidden West, with other newer machines mainly taking the limelight. Scrappers perhaps have a bit more armour than the Scroungers, though their attack patterns are pretty similar, using jaws and claws to rough you up, while firing energy shots at you from a distance, with the Scrappers even able to shoot purple lasers in your direction too, with members of the pack helping each other out, using a variety of different attacks that need to be dodged. A really unique machine that you'll find in the Forbidden West is the Spikesnout, an acquisition machine with a similar appearance to an anteater that liquefies and extracts resources from the land, which is then contained in sacs along its body and tail. These guys are covered in sacs containing different types of liquid, all of which affect you and other machines in different ways. Although they can resort to melee attacks, Spikesnouts mainly use those different liquid types to support other machines or disrupt their attackers, spraying other machines with mist to give them statistical boosts, while also spraying you to drain your health and stamina over time. How nice of them. The red liquid amplifies damage, the blue liquid dampens it, and the green one reduces stamina. And of course, shooting those coloured sacs, along with those acid canisters on its back, will cause them to burst, exposing you, the Spikesnout, and other machines in the area to their effects. Something you'll often see gliding around above your head is the Skydrifter, which basically acts like a spotting drone, scanning the area for potential threats. It's a bird-like machine that stands out like a sore thumb, typically seen in the air, emitting a huge green cone onto the ground below. If you get caught in the scanner, then your cover's pretty much blown, even if you're hiding in the tall grass, which usually isn't going to be enough to fool the crafty Skydrifter, making it extremely effective at pinpointing your position and watching over other machines. Once a threat's been detected, it'll then go on to attack using a combination of different aerial attacks, dive bombing you while swooping down from the air, or thrusting forwards and slashing at you from the ground using its sharp, razor-like wingtips, having a variety of different melee attacks while lobbing fiery darts at you using its tail. Getting spotted by one of these guys while surrounded by other machines can definitely be a bit of an inconvenience. Next up is the Plowhorn, a pretty hefty machine with the primary function to maintain the soil and disperse fertilizer and seeds. These guys plod around with their heads buried in the ground, ploughing the soil while leaving a trail of fast-growing plants in their wake. These once peaceful machines that look a little bit like Triceratops were dubbed by the Utaro tribe as the land gods, working side by side with humans, with some friendly ones still functional around the region of Plainsong. Though Plowhorns found in the wild can become hostile if you get too close, using their strength and raw power to overwhelm anyone who approaches. That's if they see or hear you, of course, because they've usually got their heads buried in the floor, unaware of their surroundings. But if one does hear you coming and decides to attack, then you can expect it to charge at you with those horns, slam into you using its hefty momentum, and essentially try and flatten you like a pancake. Failing that, Plowhorns also have mortar-style bomb attacks, launching adhesive at you from a distance to slow you down and disrupt your movements, leaving you vulnerable to its charges. The first mountable machine you'll be able to find in the game is the Charger, another machine commonly found in herds, there to gather and recycle resources, converting grass into blaze in a similar way to other machines like the Grazers. Chargers are essentially Horizon's version of bighorn sheep, equipped with two similar looking curved horns, only ones that feature chainsaw-like tools, making them all the deadlier. As you'd expect, these horns get used quite a lot during combat, rushing at you at high speeds to deal impact damage. Though along with trying to run you over, Chargers also tend to spin around and kick their attackers, dealing some nasty damage. And they're not quite as shy as some of the other lawn-mowing machines like the Grazers, as when provoked, they're more than happy to try and take you on in a fight. Though unaware Chargers in the wild can be overridden, and used as mounts for humans capable of doing so, ridden to travel around much quicker over distance, while using their kick attacks to your advantage against enemies. Lancehorns once again make an appearance from the first game, though being much rarer this time around. It's another gatherer-style machine, looking like a giant antelope, hanging around in herds and using those horns to drill into the earth and extract resources from the soil in a similar way to the Grazers. Just like the Grazers, the Lancehorns are often too busy with their heads in the dirt to notice you passing by, unless you make it obvious, of course. Although they're generally passive machines not looking for a fight, most herds do have a tough guy that likes to try and take you on, while the rest of them flee off to safety, like the cowards they are. An angry Lancehorn will use those drill horns to attack you if you venture too close by, sometimes leaping at you over distance and attempting to stab you on its way down. Though if they miss, they're going to get those horns stuck in the ground, leaving them very vulnerable, and probably feeling a bit awkward. Not all of the bird-type machines in the Forbidden West can fly. The Longleg, which sort of resembles a beefed-up cassowary or prehistoric bird creature, could often be seen wandering around or escorting travelling machines in the convoys, scanning for threats using echolocation, threats that might be dangerous to themselves and other machines they're protecting in the area. They can find you hiding in the tall grass, using waves of sound energy generated by concussive sacs, and although these machines are technically recon units, they're generally much better bodyguards than some of the others like the Burrowers, essentially being big, strong, jet-powered emus that have quite a few different tricks up their sleeve when it comes to combat. Longlegs use speed and agility, throwing themselves forward while kicking at you with their long legs. And they're also capable of using several fire-based strikes, using those jet engines, along with sonic attacks to disorient you and leave you vulnerable to other machines. Along with the chargers, another much chunkier machine that you'll be able to ride around on is the Bristleback, aka the giant warthog units that plod around, churning up the ground with their faces. Bristlebacks are typically found in small herds, working together to find resources in the soil, kinda like a lot of the other machines you'll find in the game. Though these guys are always going to have elemental power, either fire or acid depending on the variant, with tubes running underneath their bodies, leading to canisters held on their backs, which can be shot off and gathered of course. Bristlebacks really don't like being disturbed, becoming very aggressive, charging at you with those huge tusks, throwing their body weight around to knock you down, or even using elemental energy to deal damage over range. Though once you contain one of these beasts, you'll be able to utilise their extra power for yourself. They're not quite as nippy as the chargers, but they can take a hell of a lot more damage. If you swapped out the Lancehorn's antelope horns for deer antlers, then you'd get the Fanghorn, which has a very similar purpose in the game, though has a slightly different style of combat. They're still very skittish machines that often hang around in herds and run away from danger, despite looking a bit more badass with those flaming antlers. Though because they do have those flaming antlers, they're also elemental machines using blaze to create fire, which can then be used against you, to turn you into a candle. I guess you could say that out of the 3 grazing style machines, the Fanghorns are the superior form, having more health than the others while dishing out larger amounts of damage, which can often be elemental. Though in comparison to most of the other stuff you'll run into, they're not really going to pose too much of a problem, basically acting like a Grazer, but slightly meaner. Redeye Watchers can be found in Horizon Forbidden West, which are basically upgraded versions of the standard Watchers found in the first game, designed for reconnaissance and alerting nearby machines of hostiles, but also having enough power to try and take on the threat themselves, with Redeyes essentially being more geared up for combat than their original, weaker counterparts. They behave in the same sort of way, patrolling areas in groups and scouting for threats, screaming to the high heavens when one's been identified. Typically you. Though unlike standard Watchers, the Redeye often likes to keep its distance and attack you from range by firing concussive energy projectiles, sometimes using stun flash attacks to temporarily blind you, which in the middle of a chaotic fight isn't exactly very helpful. These guys can attack using melee up close, but because of their clumsy top-heavy design, it's not always their most effective strategy, often falling down after attacks. The Redeye Watcher might be a slight upgrade to its predecessor, but just like the Burrower, it's still one of the weakest machines in the game, mainly there to alert other machines and cause disruption during fights with tougher opponents. If you've ever wondered what you'd get if you combined a vacuum cleaner with a hippopotamus, I'm sure you probably have at some point, then look no further than the Widemaw, an amphibious machine that essentially hoovers up soil and sand, sifts through it, gathering resources, while creating fertilizer pods, which are then ejected as they wander around. Just like a hippo, the Widemaw's got a massive mouth, only this one's a lot spikier, splitting into segments once opened, revealing lots of nasty drills and pointy metal spines. The same vacuum it uses to suck up resources is also used to draw you closer to all those sharp pointy teeth-like tools, stomping on anything and anyone unfortunate to be pulled towards its gaping jaw. Their mouths aren't the only thing you need to worry about, with Widemaws also having the ability to hoover you up with their asses too. Pretty wild. Not to mention the fact that dirt and debris sucked up can be moulded into projectiles and sent flying in your direction over distance too, should the Widemaw be out of range for a close quarter jump. Definitely a machine to keep an eye out for, especially around watery areas. One of the deadlier machines you'll find around the Forbidden West is the Clawstrider, and if you've seen Jurassic Park, you can probably guess what's inspired its design. I mean, they've even got the same bloody claws. Unlike Jurassic Park though, these Velociraptor-style beasts are covered in metal plating resembling feathers, which is probably a nod to the dinosaur's supposed real-life form. Of course, Clawstriders are pretty different to those, having chainsaws for teeth and all, and it'll use a variety of deadly tools and aggressive attacks to take down its targets, being a machine crafted specifically for combat purposes and for killing humans. They're quick, agile, and tend to hunt in packs, not really the kind of machine to give up a fight easily either, pursuing hostiles with unrelenting determination to snuff them out. There's a few different variants of Clawstrider, including elemental types, though most of its attacks are generally melee based, using those claws, tail, and chainsaw teeth to maul, slash, and do most of the damage. It's also key to know that Clawstriders are also mountable machines too. They do travel around at a slower pace than the others, but at least you're gonna look cool. Corruptors make a comeback in Horizon Forbidden West, though they definitely aren't as common as they were the first time around, only being found during a single story mission and in the arena. These ancient Corruptors are like huge scorpions that scatter around quickly, armed with lots of deadly firepower, being a machine built specifically for war. This is the thing that pretty much caused the world's demise in Horizon's lore, destroying all life on Earth when the original units went a bit AWOL many years ago. Though in present day in Horizon, most of these remain buried and non-functional, some of which can be seen standing dormant like rusty statues in No Man's Land, as a stark reminder of the world's troubled past. It's easy to see just how they decimated the Earth, being the highly effective combat machines they are, packed full of explosive weapons and an appetite for destruction. Fights can be quite chaotic, using fast swipes and projectile launchers to cover all ranges. But they also have the ability to throw massive boulders at you too, just in case grenades and rockets aren't quite enough. Another returning machine from the first game is the Bellowback, a really unique dinosaur looking thing carrying huge tanks of elemental liquid on its back. It's a fairly big machine that probably looks more intimidating than it actually is, due to it being a bit slow and clumsy, and due to you being able to shoot those really exposed elemental tanks to create a massive explosion, damaging the poor Bellowback and everything else around in the vicinity. No matter what variant you run into, whether that be fire, frost or acidic in the Forbidden West, they're all going to have similar attack patterns, and they're all going to use their elemental liquid against you, unless you blow those tanks sky high, that is. Having a flamethrower for a face is a pretty convenient thing for the Bellowback to have, allowing it to spray targets with whatever the hell those tanks are containing. Plus it'll also use its hefty weight and powerful tail to flatten you, should you let it get too close. Along with Scroungers and Scrappers, there's another machine that likes to chew on other dead machines. Only this one can fly around, the Glinthawk, which is essentially a bit like a vulture, only its beak is comprised of bug-like mandibles, used to chop up and grind down the metal parts. These scavengers can be found perched high up on rocks, tearing away at other non-functional machines, or gliding around looking for its next meal. Though when it comes into contact with humans, it's going to become hostile, instantly treating them as a threat. Glinthawks are going to use those funky beaks to deal damage as they swoop down, in combination with claw attacks and slashes. Though unlike the other ground scavengers, this machine always has an element tied to it, giving it frost or fire powers, while making it vulnerable to those types of arrows too. Obviously the opposite one to its own element. This means that it's going to lob ice balls or fire at you, or do bombing runs while airborne, so it's usually best to try and knock them out of the sky to prevent them from using those attacks. Shellwalkers grace the lands of the Forbidden West, sometimes seen in convoys, transporting those hefty cargo crates around, which sit securely on their backs. It's pretty obvious that this machine's based on the hermit crab, with that shell-like crate and its short, stubby, crustacean-like legs, though its body is essentially just a panel for cargo to sit on, which is the Shellwalker's priority to transport and guard at all costs. How is it going to guard the crate? Well, with a big blue energy shield, which activates from one of the walker's claws. While this claw mainly has a defensive function, the other has an offensive purpose, able to shoot electrical energy and generate electrical surges, or, just jab at you and inflict the pain. If you want to rob the Shellwalker blind of its precious loot, then you'll have to flank around it and shoot the frame holding the crate on its back. But with this machine being so fond of its cargo, you'll need to take it down quickly, before it reclaims the crate to take it back for itself. One of the sneakiest, most devious machines you'll come across in the game is the Stalker. Basically a panther that likes to use ambush tactics, hiding away in the dense forests. Now these guys use all the tricks in the book when it comes to hunting down its targets, using a lot of the same tools as the Predator, from invisibility cloaks, letting it blend into the trees, traps that either explode or alert the Stalker of your whereabouts, and even a high-powered energy dart, capable of inflicting lots of damage from a distance. Stalkers tend to prefer using their stealth abilities instead of gung-ho brute force like other combat machines, though they'll still pounce at you and swipe with those claws and tail if you let them get too close, often using that cloaking device to switch positions and relocate after attacks, or close the distance easier for a sneaky hit and run. To make things even trickier, they'll often hunt in small groups, so you'll have to keep your eyes peeled to spot them shimmering in the grass and get ready for a fight whenever you step into one of those flare traps and sound the alarm. If you thought the Plowhorns earlier on in the guide seemed a bit menacing, wait till you see the Grimhorn, which is basically the very same machine, but modified to be much deadlier and relentless. This advanced version was developed by the rogue AI Hephaestus, specifically for combat, no longer doing its job and contributing to the reconstruction of planet Earth, but instead now being a tool to hunt down and kill humans on sight. This evil Triceratops now has the ability to shoot flames and cluster bombs, though otherwise having similar melee attacks to its Plowhorn alternative, mainly using charge attacks and attempting to gore you with those massive tusks. Grimhorns are also much rarer in appearance, only popping up at certain points in the story, along with in the arena. So if you see one plodding along in the natural environment, you probably won't have to worry about getting melted. Chances are, it's going to be its passive dopey brother, not one of these guys. The Ravager returns from the first game, often seen prowling around on its own, or chilling out in small groups, sometimes guarding other machines. The sole purpose of the Ravager is for combat, to take on humans that might threaten terraforming herds, out to collect valuable resources. And so it means that they don't take too kindly to yourself, attacking you on sight with claw strikes and lunges, along with that beefy cannon on its back, capable of blasting out deadly energy shots. Like many other weapons the machines carry, you can detach the energy cannon by shooting it, and then return the fire, which is often one of the most effective ways to take the Ravager on, being very dependent on that cannon due to its power and effectiveness over range. It's a fairly aggressive machine which can sometimes be quite tricky to take down due to its speed and ferocity, relying much more on quick pounces and melee strikes once that cannon's been disabled. So if you want to pick it up and use it against the beast, then it's probably best to keep that in mind, because that Ravager isn't going to be very happy about it. Probably one of the freakiest sights to see when you're casually swimming along, minding your own business, is a giant robotic crocodile with a gob full of chainsaw blades and grinders, just in case the normal crocs aren't quite intimidating enough. If you encounter a Snapmaw in the water, you're definitely best avoiding it, as you're not going to be able to attack it, leaving you extremely vulnerable. But don't get too comfortable on land either, as although they don't look like they'd be able to move very fast, these machines are still pretty relentless, and surprisingly good at jumping around to catch you off guard, diving at you to cover ground quickly, snapping at you with that jaw from hell. Aside from using rapid melee lunges and tail lashes, Snapmaws are also prone to launching elemental bombs in your direction too. Bombs which burst frost or acidic clouds, making the fight more hazardous and forcing you to watch where you tread. Not exactly helpful when these guys are diving at you from all over the place. Another flying machine you'll find on your travels is the Sunwing, which is basically a big solar-powered pterodactyl that basks in the sun, absorbing its energy throughout the day. These machines can be found perched high up on the mountains and sat on tall structures and large rocky outcrops, with the sole purpose to basically sunbathe, storing energy via canisters and sparkers found on its chest and hips. Compared to a lot of other machines, it's got a pretty easy job, chilling out in the sun, loving life, like a British holiday maker in Spain. Though unlike your average holiday maker, these guys can fly, and they're going to be quite annoyed if you get too close and start firing arrows at them, unsurprisingly. Sunwings are going to use a variety of different plasma attacks to hit you from a distance, from bombs to laser strikes, with some choosing to attack you from the ground, others in the air, which can be quite tricky to hit at times, due to their speed and awkward movements. Though later on in the game, you'll be able to override and mount the Sunwings, letting you travel around on their backs and traverse around the Forbidden West much quicker and easier than before. Definitely beats walking. One of the more agile, disruptive machines you'll find amongst the forested areas of the game is the Clamberjaw. Travelling around in large packs, salvaging scrap using its claws and tail, the Clamberjaw is basically the machine equivalent to a baboon, and just like a baboon, it's able to climb trees and walls, hang onto branches, and reach areas high up without any problems, with the apex variants also known to fart. These guys are fierce and relentless, lobbing chemicals and flaming scrap pieces at you, all while using their speed and agility to jump around and make themselves tricky to land hits on and track, especially when there's a whole bunch of them, lobbing all sorts of stuff in your direction, relocating after every strike. Along with using elemental attacks, Clamberjaws can be fairly aggressive with melee too, slashing at you with that tail, biting with those sharp teeth, pouncing at you from range and creating shockwaves on the ground, not to mention using disruptive screams and bright flashes to disorient you too, leaving you very vulnerable to the rest of the pack. Nasty little buggers. Next up is the heavily armoured Rollerback, which design has taken quite a bit of inspiration from the pangolin, a mammal that looks a teeny bit like an anteater, only covered from head to tail in protective scales. Rollerbacks in the world of Horizon are huge transport machines which carry cargo containers, and as the name suggests, they're able to roll around by curling up into a ball. Despite its size, not only does this make it a quick and formidable opponent, able to knock you down like a bowling pin, but because it's covered in all those metal plates, this acts like a bit of a shield to a lot of the machine's weaker parts and main components, forcing you to be more accurate with your shots, or tear away at its armour first to reveal those tender points hidden behind. Rollerbacks will dive around and try and flatten anything in their path, sometimes even leaving behind a wall of fire in their wake, just to make those fights a little bit spicier. And if you think you'll just dodge out of the way of all of those attacks with ease, just wait till they start launching adhesive glue at you, to pretty much make you a sitting duck. If you've ever seen the movie Tremors, then the next machine might seem kind of familiar. The Rockbreaker is a ginormous mole-type machine that can burrow underground, originally to mine resources and minerals. It now uses this power, along with its overwhelming size, to attack humans walking around on the surface. Think of it as a giant land shark, only one with a gob full of huge spinning drills. Definitely something you'll want to avoid. Once above ground level, they'll crawl around throwing themselves at you head first, using their heavy weight and momentum to crush you into the dirt. Though once submerged, you'll have to keep an eye on their locations via ripples in the floor, with one of their main strategies to circle around and ambush you, jumping upwards from the ground below, only to then go back down again and relocate their position. This means you'll often only have short opportunities to strike every time the machine comes above the surface, though just be aware that the Rockbreaker can also essentially turn itself into a mini volcano, spitting fireballs all over the place which rain down from the sky, something you'll definitely need to get the hell away from. Another massive machine you'll be able to find in the game is the Behemoth, a powerful transport unit used to carry resources over the lands to cauldrons, which are supplied by other smaller machines, hence why they can often be found in convoys. It's a bit like a giant rhino, only one that uses anti-gravity generators near its head, used to lift cargo and place it into the big round container in its chest. But that's not the only thing those generators can do, as the Behemoth can actually use this anti-gravity power in combination with its attacks, hurling large boulders and debris at you, along with creating a huge blast, which picks up rocks in the vicinity and sends them flying all over the place. Obviously, being like a big metal rhinoceros, the Behemoth's also going to charge at you, using its sheer size and strength to overwhelm you. Though when they're not running at full pelt, they usually just plod around or stand around throwing rocks, making them fairly easy targets to hit. If the name doesn't give you any clues, the Dreadwing isn't exactly the friendliest thing in the world, typically seen hanging around like a vampire bat, waiting for its prey to venture nearby. These are large, heavyweight combat machines equipped with lots of different weapons and gadgets, aiding their ability to detect hostiles, disrupt vision, while keeping themselves protected. This comes in the form of sonar pings, uses a kind of alarm system to alert the machine of your presence. Though just like the Stalkers we talked about earlier, these guys also have the ability to cloak themselves and turn invisible too, not to mention the fact that they can also fly, adding even more peril to fights and making them even trickier targets to take on. Although you'll typically only find one Dreadwing at a time, they've got enough firepower to act like several machines rolled into one, using ranged attacks, bombing runs and deadly swooping slashes in combination with all those disruptive gadgets, even able to temporarily disable your focus, which, with invisibility and erratic flight movement, can make it pretty hard to accurately land shots on the Dreadwing's main components and weak points. The Loch Ness Monster does happen to exist, but it doesn't live in Loch Ness, choosing to reside in the Forbidden West instead. Although you can see these huge plesiosaur-type machines drifting around the water, filtering sediment in vast lakes and aquatic zones, Tiderippers are amphibious machines that can function both in and outside of the water, being extremely dangerous if they catch you swimming alongside them, mainly because you've got no way of taking them on, but also being really ferocious on land too. They use a variety of slam attacks, jumping around like a massive excitable puppy, along with high-powered water-based cannons and heavy projectiles to attack you up close and from a distance, allowing the machine to cover different ranges and adjust its tactics throughout fights. It might look like a big lumbering dope, something mainly designed to be effective underwater, but don't be fooled by its sluggish movements on land, because Tiderippers can very quickly gain ground on you, being propelled by purge water jets, while shuffling forward surprisingly fast due to its sheer size and momentum. One of the most relentless machines you'll find lurking under the ground is the Shellsnapper, another gigantic machine that lies dormant under the soil and sand, guarding the area from threats, very effectively too. Designed to kill humans, it'll essentially ambush its targets, emerging from the ground in a similar way to the Rockbreaker, only rather than digging around quickly under the floor, relying on hit and run tactics, the Shellsnapper relies more so on staying above the surface and using its protective shell as a shield against oncoming attacks. If it wasn't already obvious, these guys resemble snapping turtles, but probably have a bit more in common with Blastoise, with their shells armed with various cannons, able to launch rockets and frost projectiles over range, knocking you over and slowing you down. Shellsnappers will bite, spin, and try to belly flop you, usually relying on those cannons to limit your movement. Though just be aware that hitting that plated shell will not only absorb damage, but it'll also convert and utilise this energy for itself, which can be unleashed in a large blast, stunning nearby humans, leaving them vulnerable to attack. A similar sized aerial machine to the Dreadwing, the infamous Stormbird returns to terrorise the skies once again, being one of the most ruthless things from the first game. It's like a giant electric eagle, patrolling the air and roosting high up, searching for humans which it can take down. As although these machines were once terraformers, created to detoxify the air and atmosphere, they're now programmed to hunt humans, deeming them hostile while attacking them on sight. Although rarer machines in the Forbidden West, they're still very dangerous, applying many different types of attacks from both the air and the ground, many of which give off electrical shock energy. Due to the Stormbird flapping around all over the place, this means that being precise and tearing off individual parts can be trickier than normal, often known to fly off and attack from unexpected angles, and even being pretty smart about their placement in the air too, swooping down in front of the sun, using its bright glare to restrict your vision. Clever tactic. Now it wouldn't be a Horizon game without the good old Thunderjaw. This bad boy of a machine is basically the game's version of a T-Rex, only one covered in protective plating and armed with lots of heavy weapons and artillery. Thunderjaws were created for the sole purpose of culling the earth from its human inhabitants, and they do a pretty good job too, which is unsurprising, having so much armour and firepower. They use lots of different melee strikes, from charge attacks, tail swipes and jaw lunges to bowl you over and cover ground quickly. Plus they're also fitted with loads of laser weapons and cannons, to zap you over distance and turn the place into an epic rave, albeit a deadly one. Their mouths can rapid fire energy shots, their hips can launch weaponized drones, and a lot of their weak parts are often hidden by tough metal plates, making them brutal machines to go up against, and one of the most formidable opponents in the series. Generally best avoided until you've got the gear and the balls to take them on in a fight. A much smaller but still really aggressive machine you'll find pacing around in the snowy areas is the Frostclaw, a deadly acquisition machine first introduced in Zero Dawn's Frozen Wilds DLC. Think of this guy as an angry bear with cryogenic abilities, packing lots of armour while being able to move around fairly quickly. They're not quite as big or intimidating as the other high-powered machines, but they can still be just as dangerous, using swipes from its claws and slams from its body to knock you around, combined with lots of different frost-powered attacks, which slow down movement and inflict sustained damage over time. Frostclaws will often chase you around the environment, using its mobility and speed to get the better of you, or throw ice fragments in your direction instead, giving it more ways to attack over distance. Though unsurprisingly, they're very vulnerable to fire damage, so flame arrows are going to be your best friend when taking these guys on. On the flip side, instead of using lots of different freeze abilities, the Scorcher is a machine that prefers to turn the heat up and play with flames and fire, as the name suggests. Scorchers are dog-like in appearance, having large bodies and powerful legs, looking somewhat similar to Ravagers, only with a few extra canine-style features. These machines are generally more vicious and aggressive than Ravagers, utilising a variety of fast-paced melee attacks and lunges, able to pounce over long ranges to reach their targets in the blink of an eye. As you'd expect, this guy's a bit of a twisted fire starter that likes to spew flames everywhere, sending waves of fire that travel along the floor, or a series of exploding mines that can be lobbed all at once, dealing devastating amounts of damage to anyone in the area. I guess you could call these guys the Hellhounds of Horizon. Not a machine to be underestimated. Probably one of the most unique machines you'll find throughout your journey is the Slitherfang, which is a robotic mix-up between a king cobra and a rattlesnake, having similar features and behaviour patterns to both. Slitherfangs are a hell of a lot bigger than your average snake, towering over pretty much everything else surrounding the area, though despite giving you a brief warning by giving that tail a little wiggle, they're generally very hostile machines that will attack you with full force when encountered. A lot of their strikes involve tail swings, charges and fang attacks, launching themselves at you ultra fast, thus making them fairly awkward targets to dodge, especially with them being so bloody huge. Though they'll also coil up and spray streams of toxic acid or purge water at you, dealing elemental damage. Though along with that, due to them having an electric rattle, this also gives them access to shock attacks too, letting them fire bolts of lightning which generate waves of electrical power. Slitherfangs also have another trick up their sleeves, as they're able to coil around nearby pillars to gain extra height, giving them an advantage when using some of those ranged attacks, firing toxic streams and sonic energy at you from a new, higher vantage point. Another fairly intimidating machine that you'll come across several times during your journey is a great big heavily armoured elephant, packed out with tons of heavy weaponry to give you a bit of a headache. I guess this guy's more like a mammoth because of its huge size and massive tusks, which unsurprisingly are going to get used to knock you around all over the place, with tremor tusks taking full advantage of their bulky bodies to squash anyone unfortunate enough to be nearby. But although charging at you with those tusks might seem like the most obvious tactic, they're generally more known for engaging targets from a distance, using a wide array of launchers, rockets and even flamethrowers, relying on that strong metal armour to protect it, while it slowly paces around, letting all its guns and swanky gadgets do the talking. Tremor tusks might normally be a bit slow and dozy, though they can pretty much attack you from every angle and range, even throwing rocks at you if need be, put all those elemental cannons to good use, or even deafen you with their trumpet call. It's easy to see why Regala's rebels chose to mobilise tremor tusks, as they're practically the Horizon equivalent to a giant tank. Moving on to the Frostclaw's bigger, older brother, which chooses to chill out in dense forests, Fireclaws also make an appearance in the game, and what you get is basically what's written on the tin. These machines are noticeably bulkier and more hench than the cryogenic ones, arguably even more aggressive too, as although they employ a lot of similar attacks, only ones that are fire-based instead. They also pick up much bigger boulders, which shield the Fireclaw from your arrows, and choose to throw said boulders at you to create a big fiery explosion. Being a fire-based machine, it's no surprise that frost ammo is going to be this guy's main weakness, though having so much armour plating covering its weak spots can sometimes make Fireclaws quite difficult to take on, as they might not be as agile as their frosty counterparts, but they still tend to move around quite a lot, making precise shots tricky to land. If you fought Thunderjaws with the nastiest robot dinos in the game, this next machine definitely gives it a run for its money. The Slaughter Spine not only has a pretty savage sounding name, but it's sort of similar to a Spinosaurus, with an elongated snout and a back spine made of saw blades, though also covered in heavy armour plates too. It's easily one of the deadliest machines in the game, boasting tons of firepower while having some really unique attack patterns, doing all the usual stuff you'd expect like charging, biting and lashing out at you with its tail, but also being able to charge itself up like a battery and unleash devastating plasma attacks from a distance too, whether that be in the form of shockwaves, plasma beams or missiles, all of which can be tricky to avoid. Because Slaughter Spines are so heavily armoured, with their weak points being fairly small, this adds another layer of peril to fights, often forcing you to chip away at its metal plating first, before you can dish out some significant damage. They have lots of different ways to take you on, while resisting a lot of attacks you'll return, making them extremely effective killing machines. If you're spotted by one, get ready for a proper fight. So other than overridden machines, the Tallneck's the only one that doesn't treat humans like a threat, being a huge but peaceful observation unit designed to collect data on the region while monitoring other machine activity, using signals for communication. Think of it like a giant walking Wi-Fi router, only one that looks a bit like a giraffe in a sombrero. Their heads basically act like a circular platform, containing a data node which can be overridden to reveal information on the map, though you've got to get up there first somehow, either by climbing along the machine's armour plates and antennas, or by getting above the Tallneck first and gliding down to land on top. It's a good thing these machines aren't hostile, as they're not only really bloody big, but they're also extremely strong and durable, able to withstand pretty much any normal attack, practically making them invincible, at least in the game anyway. The Spectre is probably the weirdest machine you'll find in Horizon Forbidden West. It comes in the form of a strange combat drone, with lots of white plates and tentacles, looking a bit like a PS5 console, but one with a crazy alien growing out of it. Spectres are highly advanced combat machines created by Far Zenith, but unlike your typical metal beasts roaming the environment, these guys are made from nanotechnology, able to morph that metal plating into shields and deadly weapons. They also can't be found naturally wandering around the game's world, and are mainly found guarding Zeniths, often popping up in main story missions, in a way acting like mini-bosses. That also means they can't be overridden, and are going to attack you relentlessly on sight, using a wide array of cannons and guns, morphing their frames to extend their reach, knocking you down with those horns and tentacles, using both melee and ranged attacks to dish out some serious damage. None of this is made easier by the fact that Spectres are also really agile, and tend to jump around a lot too, making them very powerful opponents, boasting some of the best technology in the game. So the last machine is basically the endgame boss, so obviously the next part of the guide might contain some possible spoilers. Do be warned. Anyway, right at the very end of Horizon Forbidden West's main storyline, you're going to run into Spectre Prime, a far zenith exoframe operated by Tilda inside. This is basically like a really big version of the normal Spectres, but looking a bit more human in appearance, standing on 2 legs and even having a bit of a face. Being the big boss at the end, she's obviously going to be quite tough, arguably the most powerful thing you're going to have to take on, being a good opportunity to showcase some of that advanced zenith technology. The exoframe machine can float around the arena, allowing it to move around in a fast but graceful manner, often hovering around in the air and slamming the floor, or using its blade-like arms to swipe at you or knock you down, leaving you vulnerable to other melee strikes. Of course, smacking you around isn't Tilda's only option, with that exoframe being fitted with plenty of pulse cannons and explosive projectile weapons too. And if that heavy armor plating didn't seem hard enough to blast off, well, some of it can actually be regenerated, giving the Spectre Prime lots of protection against your attacks, along with lots of firepower, to give you a pretty rough fight. So those are all the 43 machines you'll find in Horizon Forbidden West's main game. Give me a like if you enjoyed the video to show some support, and be sure to check out my channel and subscribe if you want to see more guides just like this. Thanks for watching, take it easy, and I'll be seeing you in that next one.